Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Markademics Podcast, episode number 2. My name is Viktor Stoilov, and today I'm speaking with Pattoli, the founder of Cometly. So, if you're an e-commerce advertiser and you are using Facebook ads or TikTok ads, you definitely want to know what Cometly is, and you definitely want to watch this episode because with Matt, the founder of Cometly, we're speaking about the issues when it comes to iOS tracking, how you can solve them, where it came from in the first place, and what's the future of advertising and tracking in general. So if you're interested in those topics, definitely watch the episode and stay tuned for more. Okay, so now we're live. Great. Welcome everybody to the second episode of the Markademics Podcast, and I'm super excited as today we have a special guest, Pattoli from Cometly. And for those of you who don't know what Cometly is, if you're an e-commerce advertiser or you're having an e-commerce store in general, you definitely should know what Cometly is, as it's one of the solutions to all of the crazy problems that all of us are facing with the iOS updates and the lack of proper tracking. So today we'll be speaking with Matt on the future of tracking, on how we can solve our issues, and if there are possible really full solutions to what's going on right now. So as I said, I'm very excited to have you, Matt. Welcome to the Markademics Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Victor. Appreciate it.
So let's dive into it right away. Since Cometly is one of the solutions to finding a real solution to your tracking issues when it comes to your Facebook ads, and now from what I'm hearing, TikTok as well, launching right now. How did you get involved in Cometly in general? Why did you decide to start Cometly? How did it happen?
Yeah, for sure. So Grant Cooper is the other founder of Cometly. We had an advertising agency for many years. I think back in 2012 we started, and the ad platforms were around, but they were nowhere near what they are now, or where they have become. And so we worked with probably over 1,000 clients throughout the years. We had some larger clients, with a lot of small businesses. So we really ran ads in a bunch of different verticals. So anywhere from e-commerce, marketing funnels, all types of services businesses. And then, Grant and I also had, an Amazon business, Shopify stores. We had affiliate marketing stuff that we did and still do. And, throughout the years, we just really kind of fell in love with ads. And, what happened was we were actually at the time, we exited that business and right before COVID started, and it was I think September, October of 2019, and that agency was called Social Vantage. And we exited, and then we kind of just started getting back and running some of our own stuff again, and started scaling up a lot in some affiliate space and ClickBank stuff, some Shopify stuff. And then even before iOS 14 became a thing, later on the following year, we had a lot of tracking issues. I mean, it was kind of reliable, but never fully accurate. It was probably 70-80%. I mean, you had a good idea, right?
Yeah.
But when iOS 14 happened, we were actually it was actually the same week we launched Cometly, believe it or not. So yeah, I mean, it kind of was good timing for us, but we were building this because there was already an issue beforehand. And we wanted that accurate data and build ad optimization tools to help us.
So that's quite interesting. So you didn't start Cometly because of iOS 14 and 14.5. You started it prior to it because you already were starting to see the issues with tracking.
Yeah, exactly. So we started building it. I mean, we went into really full development around December of 2020. I'm sorry. December 2020. And but we probably earlier that summer in 2020, we were building the solution, probably probably say April, May. And what we did originally is we had a massive Google Sheet concoction, essentially, where we probably had every ad account had its own sheet. It linked up to a dashboard, and we actually got we had a developer helping us with some really cool methods to get accurate data coming in correctly. So when we had that, we were oh wow, this is awesome. Let's turn it into a software. And then it really just evolved from there. And then we went live in April of 2021.
Okay, then that's absolutely great. And I definitely want to continue on the topic of iOS 14 and 14.5 updates, which were
Mhm.
absolutely the highlights of the advertising world in
Yeah.
2021 and 2022. So we've all experienced the issues that came with it. However, almost nobody from my experience truly understands what's happening between Apple and what Apple actually did. So can you explain it just technically? What
Yeah.
exactly is going on? Because like I'm even seeing 7, 8, even 9-figure business people that don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's pretty simple what's happening, and for us too, like I'm trying to educate people on as much as possible because there are ways around it. There are ways to really improve ads, even though this is happening. So essentially, there's something called an IDFA, which is an identifier for advertisers that Apple is basically giving. It's basically a unique random ID that's assigned to Apple devices. Now what they did is Apple launched something called ATT. So that's they're basically their transparency tracking, right? So application tracking transparency. So ATT. So essentially, what they did is they gave users the option to opt out of app tracking. So, basically when that update came out, the first thing people saw is a pop up like, hey, like, these apps are tracking, your device. Do you want to block them? And believe it or not, I mean, 96% of US users, they opted in to, well, I'm sorry, they opted out of app tracking,
Yeah,
right?
so that they can be tracked.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so they opted out of app tracking. And so when that happened, Apple stopped sharing the IDFA, so the identifier,
Hmm.
with Facebook. And Facebook had, and there's a lot of good stuff on this online. If you look into the IDFA and do a little deeper for any listeners, um, Facebook basically was probably spent 7-8 years just building their entire tracking mechanism based off that, right? So they kind of went all in on that, and when this happened, it was a huge shock. So at first, there was an immediate decline. It went from like 85, 90% being tracked in there to like 40, 50%. And, you know, sometimes it was just attributing to the wrong ad set and ad, and that's still
Hmm.
going on now. But
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
that's essentially what happened. And this is not just affecting Facebook anymore. I mean, this is affecting TikTok. This is affecting other platforms. So I mean, it's really if depending on how the ad platform was dependent on using the IDFA for tracking is what has impacted. It impacted the ad network the most, and obviously that was the case for Facebook.
Okay. Well, that's quite interesting. And is if somebody opts out from being tracked, is there any way possible to be tracked? Is there any, because there's so many like say quote unquote conspiracies out there that Facebook is using way more mechanisms to be tracking you. So is Facebook continuing in any other way officially to be tracking you outside of that?
Well, what they're doing, so they know who views their ads, right? I mean,
Mhm. Yeah.
obviously, because that's just like product analytics on their side. Like they know who is viewing ads. So what they did, and that's why I'll start with there. What they did first is they changed the attribution window. So before it was all
Mhm.
click through, right? So
Yeah.
if somebody would click through, that was like the conversion, and that was the way that everybody was used to. That's the way so many brands scaled their scaled up, was because it was click through attribution. So when somebody's clicking through, right, and they buy, or an event occurs, and what happened is they changed now to view through attribution. So if somebody views the ad, and then there's a purchase and they receive it back through the conversion API, or even the browser event, then they can, like a page load, they know that person bought. But essentially, like the view through attribution, it's not beneficial because what's happening is, and other platforms are adopting this too. If you get like 1,000 purchases right now, let's say like in a month, you may have Facebook now over reporting in some cases. It's not always just under reporting. There's cases where it's over reporting now for whatever reason because they're trying to take credit from purchases that happen from other ad platforms.
Mhm.
TikTok is doing kind of a similar thing, but TikTok is more on the side of just like under attributing more than over. But Facebook now is, you're seeing, and there's waves of it. Some weeks there's like waves of over reporting, so they're definitely testing stuff. It just depends. It also just depends on your store or your website, and technicalities there. But yeah, that's essentially what's happening. And personally, like if you're optimizing your ads, for me personally, I prefer click-through attribution, because that's the exact ad that generated that result.
And that's only being tracked because of the conversion API and not because of anything else.
Yeah. So here's, for, you're saying just for Facebook?
Yeah. If we're just speaking about Facebook today.
Yeah, exactly. So, so the conversion API is essentially like, it's taking the first party data on the site, right? So on like, on, let's say, like, for instance, let's look at just like the native Shopify Facebook, the native Facebook conversion API, right? So like when you're setting up and you select Facebook and like a Shopify store backend, essentially what you're doing is you're just sharing that data back to through using the Facebook conversion API, sending that purchase data back, or the add to cart, initiate checkout, that kind of stuff, right? And that's great, but at the end of the day, so Facebook like knows, like at that point, like kind of who's purchasing. Like it's still, though, they're blocked by a couple of different things that we'll get into, because Shopify reporting is not always picking up everything. You see a lot of direct visits or direct purchases on there. And that's because even Shopify is struggling to, determine where that's from. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But essentially, the conversion API, even if like Facebook is receiving data, right? If a user opted out of app tracking that purchased, they are not allowed to show the advertiser that result, right? So, they may know that, and there's no information on, if there's speculation, but there's no like valid information on if they are using that data to optimize. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day here, it just comes back to, you can see it in the events manager, right? What they're doing, but you're not actually able to determine, if Facebook is actually optimizing based off of it, right?
And you can only speculate whether that's happening or not.
Exactly.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, it's tough to speculate,
Yeah, well, the job for every e-commerce advertiser has become way tougher because of all of this. Who wins from all of this? Do you think that there's a winner from all of this?
Well, I think society overall, I mean, people aren't going to be being tracked, by Facebook like that. But at the end of the day, like, I don't really know if anybody wins. I mean, I think it's whatever the regulations are, like, in Europe, GDPR stuff, however that plays out. But like, it's not even that. It's tough. I really don't think there's a winner. I really do believe, though, that whoever is going to take advantage of tools out there, and investing time and money into making sure you're optimizing your ads based off accurate data, those are going to be the winners, because it's still possible to succeed right now. The only way you're not going to is if you rely on the native ads manager data. So, I mean, because there are a lot of people that are successfully tracking, right? It's just, you have to, you have to take the time to understand it, learn it, and get it implemented.
That's so great, and something that I wanted to ask you from the beginning, because that's something that I'm getting also as a question, because I have my agency, I have my e-commerce stores, and people were asking me, okay, so what do those platforms do? Like Hyros, like Triplewell, like Cometly, what do they do? And I really need to explain to them what's happening, and I think that there's no better person in the world right now. So what does Cometly exactly do for advertisers? And side note for our viewers and for our listeners, it's not a paid episode. I'm just genuinely asking Matt, like, what do you exactly do technologically to be tracking more correctly than Facebook can?
Yeah, for sure. So, we don't have that restriction, right? Because like, we don't need that specific information from Apple in order to like, track or like people opt out. Essentially, we're using first party data, and not even just us, like the entire industry. Everybody's pretty much using first party data, which means that that's data like on your site that like you own and you have, to implement like tracking mechanisms so that you can track specific events or purchases back to the correct ad. So essentially, URL parameters have been around for a long time, right? So UTM campaign, UTM content, UTM medium, all that stuff. Now, what happens is when somebody, if you put those on your ads and somebody, comes to your website or to your store for e-commerce situation, we'll use e-commerce for this example. If you use like, UTM campaign equals like Facebook, right? And that goes to your store. These companies, and including ours as well, will basically recognize that specific visitor. And then our pixels that you install on the store will essentially capture that information and then save different attributes about that visit, so that we can attribute it back if there is a purchase event, because we do have that direct integration with Shopify. We can essentially get that order information and understand it, and then use everybody uses different algorithms to track it back. For us specifically, I'll talk about that, how we basically do it. You have a direct integration set up if you're a customer of Cometly, right? So you have like a Shopify, you have the Shopify, every order from Shopify is directly coming into our platform. And what happens is there's different attributes that we have specifically to track back. So, number one, obviously, like if it's in Shopify reporting, right? We can Shopify reporting is reliable. If it's, in terms of tracking it back to the correct ad. So like we will look for that first. But like, like we talked about earlier, like there's direct visits that come up in the reporting. And this happens probably like 50, 60% of the time. You'll see that it's like a direct visit or something, depending on what the ad platform is. And what happens is, that if you're just looking at Shopify reporting and you're looking at the UTM stuff, like, it may show you have 40 sales for yesterday, but you're maybe only seeing like 20 or 25, right? So those other sales, they likely came from ads. And what happens is our platform will essentially run an algorithm, and we'll get into the technicalities, and match it back based off different attributes of that user. So we use right now, like IP address basically is a basic one, data storage in the browser. We do have a cookie, but like, again, cookies are going away. It's just one step of it. But like, cookies are going away and it won't affect the tracking at all. And then another is fingerprint tracking, which is on the newer side for our tracking. And essentially that's a way of like getting like a digital fingerprint, so that, we can make like a unique profile about that visitor. And there's a ton of like different attributes. But essentially then fingerprint tracking creates like a model so that we can create like a unique profile. So if that person comes to the site, they're a visitor, and then they leave, and they come back like 3 days later, and they buy, we'll run through like our standard, algorithm. And then we'll also look at like our print tracking stuff, fingerprint tracking, and we will determine if that visitor like has those, if we can match it back to that unique profile, and then, attribute the sale from there. So that's essentially what's happening. It's really, for us, it's a combination of a lot of different methods to then make that match. But like, we don't guess, it has to match exactly, or we're not going to output it as a attribution.
Are you giving back data to Facebook in any way so that they can optimize better?
Yes, exactly. So, we have our conversion API, and essentially what happens is we're sending that data back to Facebook. So like we get the Facebook click ID, the all of that information, right? So like IP address, all that kind of stuff, city, state, all that stuff that we are getting from the order. We basically will then take what we know in combination with the order from Shopify and send it back to Facebook. I think the most important thing is that, we matched it back to the correct ad, right? Because on those parameters, like that ad ID so it's like UTM campaign, ad ID, the dynamic ad ID. That's what's going, and then our pixels capturing that information. So if they buy, we know it came from that ad, and we send it back to Facebook. That's a specific ad.
So how is that helping advertisers? Because I know how it's helping me because I'm also using Cometly. I've used all of the platforms basically that I've just mentioned, and I know, but like for our listeners, how does that help an advertiser?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think number one, it just massively gives you visibility. So from before, it's like almost like a before and after kind of thing. Like before, it's like you have no idea what's working, you have no idea what to scale up. And this is for using Cometly or any other tracking software. You really just you don't have that visibility to make data-driven decisions so that you can scale the ads effectively. 9 times out of 10, like one of the main reasons for me, like why as an advertiser I wanted to build this platform was because I was scaling up the wrong ad sets and turning off the wrong ads or ad sets,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
it's impossible to scale up if you're not making decisions based off accurate data.
Mhm. And I can even add up to this that there were many agencies, including ours, was even signing contracts based on Facebook data. So if we were achieving certain type of data, and after the iOS 14 updates, everything got completely destroyed. And yes, if I can give an advice to every e-commerce owner is that um, if you really want to scale up, you absolutely need to have a type of solution that's Cometly or anything around Cometly. So like Cometly. So and having that in mind, what do you think that the future of advertising, the short future of advertising would look like? Are we expecting something else that's going to change the game as it changed last year?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is like there were a lot of early platforms like building off the APIs for these platforms, like the major ad channels, and I think they were really like focused on like all of these. Well, basically, everybody relied on the data in the native ad managers, right? And this same thing for Google too. I mean, Google has like the cookies going away. It was going to be
Mhm.
2023, but now it's 2024. So like they're going to
Yeah.
have the same problem. There's all these companies and all these tools out there that are great, but they're all for like like ad optimization stuff, and the accurate data issue is like probably the most important thing. So I think like we're going to see this transformation of people maybe stop using these other tools that are essentially like just all ad optimization, and they start using accurate data tools. And or I think they're going to start. I think businesses overall, like just tracking in general, especially like the way like with the way that however the economy pans out, which is completely unpredictable. Yet
Yeah.
you can speculate, but I think people right now. They're spending $100,000 a month. If the consumer confidence goes down, and the consumer behavior and purchase behavior goes down, we're going to start seeing advertisers pulling back because the acquisition cost to acquire that
Gonna go up.
customer is going to go
Yeah.
up.
Mhm.
And then it's going to really be important to understand where every advertising dollar is going and measuring the success of it. It's not just going to be the kind of thing where you can spend $100,000 a month and say, okay, great, we got like 180, 200,000, 300,000 in sales. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every dollar is going to count, I think. And I think that's why I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But yeah,
I
the ad optimization tools too, like, we are moving that direction, obviously, but like, I think those are important, but I just think there's going to be a shift of mindset where everybody really needs to have that accurate data.
Because you can base your decisions just on a like, oh, I think that this ad is working well, or this ad set is working well. You need to really base it on data, or you're just absolutely playing with fire this way. And you mentioned something, and we spoke about it prior to having this episode. But I think, and I spoke with some people about it. Fingerprint tracking is an interesting topic, and I think for our viewers and listeners, it's going to be quite interesting to know what fingerprint tracking really is. I did quite some research when you started mentioning that. To me, it was very interesting. But when I spoke to friends who are owners of big stores, almost none of them had an idea how all of this is going to work out. So, can you give us a not even a brief, but like an how would you explain what fingerprint tracking is and how it's going to be affecting people?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, it's just it's basically using data that different characteristics like your mobile device, your computer, screen resolution, the operating system, the model, like all stuff like that, like all these different attributes, like just tons of data points to to basically create a unique profile. And like right now, like they overall, like I guess it's like what, like they say like what, 60% like kind of like accurate in terms of like that, in terms of like creating that profile. But like there's different methodology you can use, like a lot of it's like AI stuff where you can essentially improve that, and it's going to keep improving to make sure that that unique profile is spot on. So I mean, that's essentially what it does. It's almost like essentially creating like a barcode for each visitor that comes to your site.
Who is collecting the data though? Who is creating and collecting that data?
Well, so that data is essentially just like data that's available because like somebody's like a site visitor, right? So
Mhm.
it's technically like first party data in a way. I mean, it's essentially you're just gathering like characteristics about a visitor,
Yeah.
and then you are using that to create like a different like model,
Mhm.
um, to make that unique profile. Like so a lot of like product analytics tools. So like when you're using like a software application, um, and then there's a lot out there, but they use like fingerprint tracking, right? So like they know like exactly who that unique profile is, or different like chat support apps, or productivity apps, stuff like that. Like anything where you're engaging with customers, right? They're all basically using like stuff like that, and also like like 5% of like the top like big huge stores in the world, like the major ones, 5% of them are all using fingerprint tracking, based off like a couple articles that are online.
That's quite interesting. And if we move into the other questions, if you're starting out right now your own e-commerce brand, and you don't really know that much about the tracking, you haven't been a Facebook advertiser, but hey, you know what, you've decided to start your own e-commerce store. How are you guaranteeing yourself that you're having at least stable tracking for your ads at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think number one, even if you're not going to use a tracking software, you definitely want to use URL parameters, like UTM campaign, UTM source, like it's from Facebook, it's this specific campaign. Use UTM content to know which exact ad, maybe term or medium for the ad set. Get that information, and if you're not using a tracking software, like just gather that info, and you can install Google Analytics and get basic data to start. There's a lot of cool stuff online, but like, I think if you're just starting out, like probably the number one most important thing is your ad copy and your creative, and your product, right? So like, um, focusing number one, I think the backbone of any e-commerce store or any business is the product. I mean, that's how that's my philosophy on it. That's our whole company. Like our product is everything, right? Like that's what's going to keep people coming back and keep people using it, or keep rebuying in the sense of an e-commerce store. So number one, focus on the product. But then if you have a great product, you need people to see it. So you have to focus on your ads. I would say, depending on your vertical, I would say, or industry, I would probably say Facebook ads, or Instagram ads, and TikTok ads to start. Maybe some Google Shopping if there's a market for it. But just having sufficient tracking in place and really focusing on the ad copy and the ad creative, so that you can essentially scale up and do a test campaign and scale up from there. But yeah, I mean, I think some people try to do too much at once in the beginning. I would just keep it so simple. Maybe choose one ad platform to start, get basic URL tracking in place, URL parameter tracking, and then go from there. But another thing I always tell people if they're just getting started is, go to Facebook and go to the ad transparency on a page of somebody that's similar, and look and see what the ads they're running. Like, check out their ad copy, check out their structure, their headline, go through their funnel, click the learn more or shop now button, and go through it, right? And then model their creative and model their ad copy. And I'm not saying copy exactly, like, because that will get you nowhere. But I'm saying, like, modeling, what is their structure? What does their site look like funnel hacking, like I'll click funnels, right? So yeah, I think really spending a lot of time in the research phase is a good thing, but not too long, because the only way you're really going to know is if, you got to look at the results.
Testing. You're testing and you're learning, and then But that's an interesting way that you mentioned, that you can reverse engineer it right now. Because when I was starting to advertise, and I was my first ads I was launching, and I was promoting products on ClickBank, maybe 7-8 years ago, when it was still a thing to run Facebook ads. Go to a landing page, get their email, and put them, and get them directly then to a ClickBank page, and that was working. It was really okay at that time. But you didn't have the page transparency. But now you can literally just go to any page, and you're like, oh, what are Nike doing right now in the States? What are Nike doing right now in Japan? I really want to see how they're doing in Europe, and how is this changing? And you can absolutely make your analysis just based on that data, and you have it. It's absolutely available for you. And it's never been as transparent as it is right now. And everyone's facing the same issues as you are facing right now, right? So everyone's having issues with tracking. Everyone's having that drama. So it's not like some of them are having it, some of them are not. But great. I wanted to ask you something, because Google hasn't been as affected as Google ads haven't been as affected as Facebook ads from the iOS 14. Why is this happening?
So I think it's just like technicality wise, like, again, like Facebook, like they went all in on the IDFA. And I mean, we don't have to get into the specifics of it, but like they basically, like, they built their entire tracking technology like off of that, or a lot of it. So now, that's 7 years, like they're gonna have to really try to figure that out, and not restart, but like just make a shift, right? And Chamath Palihapitiya talked about that in the All In podcast a couple weeks ago, and they were just talking about the iOS 14 stuff, and they were just discussing it a little bit, and and he was there at the time when they were building that at Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, I think Google, they just have a different tracking mechanism. There's a lot more, like, I think, options, the way like you can do it, like tag manager and all that kind of stuff. Like, it can get more like sophisticated. But I mean, again, I think it's just the nature of how all in like Facebook went in on the IDFA compared to Google. I mean, Google is testing a lot of stuff out. There's a couple cool things. It's called like FLoC, and it's basically like a new like interest-based advertising tech, and it's used in like the Chrome browsers. So I think it's like something like a cohort label or something that's like shared by, I don't know, tons of people. And I'm still like doing tons of research on it, but like it's a new project that they're doing. And basically what's happening with Google is that they know that, like, I don't think they're getting just as much scrutiny as Facebook is. But like they know that things are changing, and they're trying to, they're really working on solutions to like build advertising technology where it's not just like relying on cookies and all that kind of stuff, right? Like Google is like very reliant on cookies for everything. And it's interesting because like they're, apparently taking it away in 2024. So when that happens, like that's going to affect their technology. And I think when that happens, they're going to have something in place that's, somewhat decent for their ad platform, or else businesses are going to be in like kind of in the same situation it is for Facebook. But I mean, again, it just comes back to Facebook going all in on on the IDFA technology and the way, just the mechanism they built it compared to Google.
So basically, they just had no diversification when it came to how they're going to be making their
from the looks of it, it looks that way.
Yeah. So okay. Well, that means that they were completely dependent on Apple in that regard. That, hey, you know what, we can just with one touch we can shut off your whole system and you're off.
Yeah. Well, they had, and they have different attributes for it. I mean, that's why there was still some stuff being tracked. But yeah, part of their model was, and the reason it was affected so much is because it was heavily reliant on that. So yeah, that's really the case. But yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be pretty interested to see. I'm interested to see what happens with all of the EU stuff, with that pressure and all that kind of stuff on the on big tech platforms and seeing what happens there. But time will tell.
And it's not only there on Facebook, because I think that Facebook has been getting all of the pressure in the past few years, especially in the States. But we're seeing that Google Analytics is facing a lot of issues in Europe, in the European Union, because of the GDPR rules, because of everything that's going on. So that will be quite interesting. And I'm sure that there are people that are lobbying for Google in the European Parliament so that all of this can be shrugged under the rug. But yeah, we'll see what's going to happen. Because at the end of the day, don't you think that if these platforms are not working as efficiently as they have been working in the past few years, this is going to, in general, really hit the economy, because then people are just not going to be buying as much as they are right now.
Yeah, I think about it. There's so many. Everybody has evolved. Every business, I feel in some way, has evolved to caring about their online presence. I remember back in, I don't know, 2011, 12, and it was pulling teeth to try to convince somebody to run ads, right?
Yeah.
Somebody that didn't really know much about it, or they just were used to referrals and word of mouth, and then obviously with AdWords and all that stuff, everybody, they knew about it, but you know what I'm saying? It was just tough to convince people that social media was going to be a thing at that time. And it's funny because that's how our original agency started. It was all social media management stuff. And then we got really heavy into the ads as time went on. But yeah, just seeing that evolution to where now everybody's fully reliant on this stuff. And there's some businesses and, most e-commerce businesses, look, if you don't have a brand that, I think about somebody that's starting out, you don't have, your brand's not really known by anybody yet. How are you going to get people, to your products and to your store? You have to run ads. And there's other methods. You can do influencer marketing and that kind of stuff. But if you want to scale really, to the masses, you want to get a, solid ad campaigns in place with some really good ROAS. And you're just, the whole world is just so reliant on it. So I'm curious to see what happens. It's not even just e-commerce. There's service companies that fully rely on getting leads and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing's going to happen for leads. And I think really more, we'll see how the effect is on Google and all that. But even people running Facebook leads, they have the same type of problem. A technology that we're releasing soon is events, and you can basically track any event for, imagine Facebook does it in the past. You had the pixel, and then you could put a specific conversion event on page load or whatever. And so, yeah, it's going to help people that are running leads, but that's also a huge problem. And many people, I know some people that spend $500K a month on lead gen, right? All their sales team. So it's affecting them too. So yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. It's kind of crazy because we have all this privacy stuff, and then we have the economy stuff, and we'll see how it all plays out.
If you have a crystal ball in front of you, and that's a very imaginary question, but if you have a crystal ball in front of you and you can guess how tracking is going to look like in 50 years and how we're going to be buying online, what would you guess? How are we going to be buying as people online? And how are we going to be tracked?
That's a good question. That's a tough one too. Let me think for a second. That's a good one. Well, I think for me personally, I think, and I could be wrong. I probably am, but I just think that, I think blockchain is going to have a huge part in everything. And in terms of people, owning their data. I do believe that's going to happen. That's just what makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, you know, if you wanted to have this super advanced smart home, and I'll tell you how it integrates back with shopping. If you want to have a super advanced smart home, you know, some technologies, right? If it all was going back to a central database and was owned by one company or owned by Google or by Apple or by Facebook, and all that data was going back, you know, in a way, people aren't going to be comfortable with it. The technology will never get here because people aren't going to be comfortable with even though the technology has capabilities to do specific things, if it involves like sensitive data that maybe you don't want going back to a centralized database, like, you know, I think people are going to want to own that data, and I don't think it should go back to those companies. And I think that like I think that the keeping everything centralized like that is probably the reason why we're not having like, you know, rapid technology like innovation in you know, smart homes. I know we are to a degree, but it's not like what you see on science fiction yet. And
no, because science fiction, we should have been flying cars already, right? Or in the past, we see 30, 40 years that the science progress hasn't been as quick as people were imagining 40 years ago.
Right. So it's like, yeah, I mean, and then it comes back to like, okay, if that's the case, like I think number one, everything's going to be, I think we're going to own our own data. So then like, if you think about how that kind of translates into tracking, I mean, I think it's going to be, well, it's the same kind of thing. If you're a business, like you own the data on your site. I think like I'm a big advocate for that. Like if somebody's going to come to your site, it's no different than walking into a store. So, I mean, like, and if somebody walks into a store, you know, you can know if they have, you know, blonde hair or brown hair or like blue eyes, green eyes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or brown eyes. It doesn't matter. And I think that like, but I also think like if somebody is choosing to like go to an online store, like they have that right to not share that information. So I think what should happen is like people have the option to share what type of data they want to share about them. And then in reward for that, if a business wants to buy that data from them when they come to the store, so by visiting that store, right, you would get rewarded like a small like crypto, right? And if the business had the settings for that, like so, if I come into your store, or I go on your store online, right, and you have a setting where okay, just by sharing these specific parameters, you get paid this percent of things, and it's like an automatic setting. So then automatically your business knows who's coming, knows the data, right?
Yeah.
That's my idea. I don't know. I've been thinking about that for.
That's probably not going to be even in 50 years. I think that even in 5 months, you might you might start doing something like that. Hey, in Europe, because like cookies here and like tracking in general, if everything is done legally, which is not, nowhere around Europe is done like legally. If you really look into the rules. But you should first accept that that a website can be gathering data from you. And if that's in reality happening, then none of the pixel thing is going to be working at all. So no website is actually complying with that rule. But even think about it. If every website is giving, let's say, 5% off when you're buying, if you accept the cookies or you accept the tracking or whatever it's called in, like, let's say 1 to 5 years from now, then it's probably going to be the way of tracking. You give bonuses to the people who are entering your websites to be sharing their data, and it's going to be interesting.
Right. And I think what needs to change on that, like, you know, I think they made too fast of updates like that. Like, I don't think they're necessarily wrong with their like their motivation for it. I just think it's not something you just like say, hey, here's what's happening. This is happening now. Like you should, you know, okay, let's collectively as a society try to figure this out and then give businesses like time and wait for technology to come along. There's an opportunity there. I mean, there again, like, and it kind of comes back to what we were talking about, like what I was just talking about, how, you know, it's just like an automatic thing. Like I shouldn't have to come to a website and just like accept the cookies, right? It should already be like, okay, if I'm visiting from like my browser, from whatever, in my browser settings, I'm like accepting that automatically or stuff like that. Like I should never have to see that more than one time. or after I configure settings on my side, right?
Mhm.
And that comes back to like a buyer profile kind of thing. But again, it's like that technology. It's not possible. It's possible with decentralization, but like with everything being centralized and all that, like again, it just comes back to like we want to own our own data, and I feel like everybody's on the same page with that. It's why so many people opted out of app tracking, right? So like people are already speaking about it and what they want. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean, I think again though, I'm also a proponent for if somebody has an online store, that's your site. It's no different than somebody coming in, right?
Mhm.
Now, it's also the right of the person, the visitor coming. They can limit the information they want to give you.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, like, no, I think if you're going to visit somebody's site, they should be able to see what device you're on, what
Yeah.
IP address, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
because that's a security thing. It's like I don't want you on my asset
Yeah.
if you're potentially trying to hack. And so
Yeah.
there's a security aspect to that of why you should get that information, right?
Absolutely. And if you go to a normal store, brick and mortar location, you can't wear certain things when you go to the store, right? Like you need
Right.
to show your identity in one way or another, like not covering fully your face or anything like that. Well, that's basically what's happening to your website when someone's visiting it and they're not sharing any data, right? And
Exactly.
because we're almost out of the topic of e-commerce, but I wanted to ask you a few things. Some are a little bit more personal that people are asking. And what are your top favorite 3 books that you would be recommending right now, people, if when it comes to marketing and when it comes to business in general?
So let's see. Well, I think probably one of my it's not so much about probably my favorite book. Ray Dalio's books are amazing.
Hmm.
Principles is like
Yep.
that's my all-time favorite book. Um, in terms of business, trying to think.
Even if it's outside of business, then what are you reading right now? What do you like to read? Do you read more psychology, business, or you go
Let me
into
look. Let's see.
literature?
So I'm actually, there's one on my table here. I'm reading one. It's just basically like a Nikola Tesla, the
Okay.
inventions, researches, and writings of Nikola Tesla. It's a cool one.
Mm.
And that's just more of like, that's like a hobby thing. Like I love what's going on with Tesla as a
Yeah.
company and all that stuff. And I like exploring and looking back at all those technologies that he had.
Yeah.
That's a personal interest of mine though. Like I just think it's fascinating, like the wireless energy stuff. That's really
Mhm.
what got me into it. I was just like trying to figure out like what's going on with wireless energy, and obviously like the world's having like an energy crisis and all that stuff. So it's something I've been reading for the past like couple of weeks, and looking at the alternatives to energy that they were talking about, or that Nikola Tesla was working on, like I don't know,
Yep.
in early 1900s, and it's 2020s now. It's just like a lot of our dependency on oil and all that stuff, and like just alternatives that he was working on. I don't know. It's really cool. I love that kind of stuff. Just it's completely unrelated to marketing, but it's a personal interest for sure.
Don't you think
Um,
that these types of books that are not related to marketing or business in general are actually helping you out to broaden your horizons when it comes to business after that? When you read
well, yeah,
about a great mind like Tesla.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like, yeah, I guess you're right. It really does. I think number one, it's just like it expands your mind in different areas, and you can like draw conclusions and make connections to things, and it kind of expands your mind in terms of how you think about things. Whether it's solving a problem, which is the fundamental thing for creating a product, or it's um, yeah, I mean just in general, or how uh, how current technologies today and what was back then, and how looking at how
Mhm.
they evolved to help you in business, kind of like, okay, well, if you're looking at the past year, the last like what 100 years of technology innovation, or even the last like 20, it can kind of help you speculate on what could happen. I mean, nobody has
Yeah.
the crystal ball, but you know what I mean? It's you're right. I mean, just like analyzing things like that can help you forecast things and can help you make better decisions with your product, with your marketing, and with your business overall.
Great. Well, I think that was a really nice answer for our audience. And also, what are your top 3 favorite places to find resources on, let's say, technology and like news and technology? What are you looking at on a daily basis? And you're like, these are my hidden gems when it comes to looking for great data and insights?
So, believe it or not, like probably Twitter. But I know
Okay.
that, and people are probably like, wait, like no way, like Twitter's just filled with bots or whatever. But like, you know what I do, and this is like, I think a lot of people should try to adopt it and just see how it works. But so I kind of like in my mind, I'll segment things like, okay, like there's marketing overall, then there's e-commerce, and then there's finance, then there's like investing, and what you'll find as you dive deeper into these communities, there's like really people that like have had a successful business or currently operating a successful business, and they give like these resources away, some of these people, and they create like these Airtables, and they give them away for free. And so that's the crazy part. Like you don't necessarily have to like, it's always beneficial to have a mentor and learn from like courses. I mean, I probably bought in my life 25 courses, and I'm not like exaggerating, masterminds. But they're the reason I think, I was able to create Cometly and have success there. And I think, but overall, these resources are really valuable. And when you like get these Airtables or these free documents or that stuff, and they put them right on like the pin on their account, or whether it's for the software industry and learning about software stuff or managing people, people specialize now in these specific things, and they're giving away a lot of free resources to not just to get you to like work with them, but just to help people in general. And the people that take the time to like organize them, figure out who you want to follow, and not just follow one person, follow a couple people in each specific thing, because that way you get different ideas. But that's probably my methodology. I have like a Google sheet for that, actually, believe it or not. And I can keep track. Another one too, if people are just trying to like stay informed for like an hour and 10 minutes every week, I think a good podcast is that All In podcast. That's with Chamath Palihapitiya, David Sachs, Jason Calacanis, and I think and David Freeberg. And what they talk about is not just like, they talk a lot about like startups, what's going on, but then they talk about geopolitical stuff, and they have good insights. I mean, they all like, it's cool because they don't all like agree on the same thing. You know what I mean?
No.
Like kind of opposing thoughts. And that's why I think the shows have such a big impact and so many people listen, because it's so cool to hear those different things among like four best friends. It's a cool podcast,
A really, really good one. And Calacanis was one of the reasons why it was, when I was still in high school, I was like, okay, I really want to have my own startup someday. And Calacanis was having one of the best probably shows when it comes to that.
It's awesome.
This Week in Startups. And, it was a really cool one.
That's awesome.
So great. Well, I have many more questions, but I think that we're almost up to 1 hour. And just wanted to thank you for being one of my guests. The idea of the Markademics podcast is to bring people who are leaders in our e-commerce industry and can really share valuable things. And I think that you just did that in the past 1 hour with us. And for everyone who just listened to the podcast or watched it, definitely share it with your friends. We're just getting started. So we'll have many more exciting guests as well, just like Matt or Alex Fedotov, who was our first guest. And stay tuned for the next episodes of the Markademics podcast. And we'll see you there.
Thanks, Victor.